spelt differently. Right now, at 6:15, we're going to try and do this every Wednesday. We're joined by someone I'll call a politico. I don't know if he agrees with the definition. Stephen Donnelly runs the Dunn Street Political Consultancy. He's got a podcast called Socially Progressive, and he's the former ALP Assistant State Secretary. So he used to be one of the machine men running the party during campaigns. Stephen, thank you for coming in.
Raf, it's my pleasure to be here.
Are you a politico? You are. Like an American definition, you're a politico.
Yeah, I guess so. I think that's the term they use. I've never actually applied it to myself, but if I was in the States, that would be the term they use, I guess.
We had a big chat on this radio station in the papers after Monique Ryan especially won the seat of Kooyong in the federal election. She seemed to have a lot of people knocking on doors for her. It seemed to be a big part of the campaign. I know you were quite adamant this is not the first time door knocking is being used. How much, take me back a bit. What's your understanding? 2014 and 2018, both Labor and Liberal, red shirts aside, was there a lot of door knocking? Was it actually, do the major parties use it? Does it make a difference?
I think your older listeners would recall sort of before the advent of TV advertising that the traditional form of campaign communication was actually talking to people. And then in the 80s and 90s, door knocking kind of got killed by direct mail and TV ads, and that's where campaigns spent a lot of their resources. Two things happened that I think sort of brought it back in vogue, and the first one was the Barack Obama's winning of the Democratic primary against Hillary Clinton, because everyone sort of stood up and went, oh, who was this guy from Illinois, this junior senator, and how did he just beat the Clinton machine? And he did it because he mobilised not hundreds of thousands, but literally millions of citizens to go out and have conversations with their neighbours. It drew my attention. It's to the point that I went over and volunteered for the Obama campaign in 2008 to go see what was actually going on as a politico. And I came home with the view that we need to do this in Australia. We didn't do this. The Labor Party certainly didn't do this. It wasn't a campaign norm. The second thing that happened at around that same time, sort of 2008 to 2012, was there were folks across the party that wanted to embrace this form of campaigning. But we knew that there were going to be people that would push back on that. There are always people who want to keep doing the same campaign strategy cycle after cycle. I mean, we talk about factions and the divisions within the Labor Party. I can give you two. Those who believe in data-driven political campaigning and those who believe in gut-feel campaigning. I sort of believe in the data-driven form of campaigning. So we went out and actually tried to work out, well, is this going to be impactful? Is this going to actually be effective form of communication as opposed to spending a lot of money on direct mail? And so we ran some experiments, and you'd be surprised to discover that having a conversation with your neighbour is far more impactful than them receiving a piece of mail in their letterbox that they're most likely not going to read and then probably chuck in the bin. So that was a critically important thing for the Labor Party. And from that moment on, I guess from that 2010-13 cycle all the way through to today, the party at a state and a national level have invested a lot of money in the identification, recruitment, organising and mobilising of ordinary citizens to go out there and have conversations with their neighbours.
Is it, in my head, if you're a two-term Labor Party and you've been in, door knocking isn't nearly as important as if you're an independent trying to knock a major party out. But is that necessarily the case? I can't imagine it making a big difference to the Labor Party this time around in the state election, but I kind of can with either the Liberal Party or the Independents. But is that fair? That's just my gut instinct about door knocking. I assume door knocking is not as useful if you're already there, if you're in government.
No, it absolutely is. The difference is that if you're the opposition, you're trying to win back votes from your opponents. Yeah. But if you're in government, what are you trying to do? You're trying to hold on to those votes. And if we stick to our research that tells us that effective, meaningful, value-based conversations between a volunteer or the candidate and a voter that is either persuadable or undecided, that conversation is critical. Because they're getting so much other news as well and contact.
So it's the human thing that makes the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So so for Daniel Andrews, if he wants to retain government, then knocking on doors and making calls is going to be critical to his success on the 26th of November.
But it's much harder, isn't it, for governments to get volunteers? Just because you're incumbents. I'm assuming it's harder for governments to do it than oppositions, and much harder than independents. They only have to do it in one seat, and you sort of have one new energised group of humans. Isn't it the easiest for independents, or have I got that wrong, do you think?
I think it's hard for everyone, actually.
Right.
It takes time. It's not something that you can just, click your fingers and wave a magic wand.
Could you do it now? Like, could you start doing it now, or you have to start of the year?
It's getting a bit late now. It's 101 days till election. It's 89 days till people start voting. The time it takes for what we call an organiser to go into a constituency, build relationships with people, get to know people, contact with people and say, hey, do you want to get involved in this campaign? You need to work with them. You've got to train them up. You've got to develop their skills. You've got to articulate what that shared purpose is, why we're motivated. You need to energise those people. It's about working towards a common goal, but that takes time. And then also getting those people to then find other people to bring them into the campaign. Sure. You kind of want between 200 to 1,000 people on a local campaign to go and do that kind of work. There's a lot of people to talk to. There's 35 to 40,000 electors in a state seat. That's a lot of conversations to have. So therefore, you need a lot of people to do that. That's where organising comes in, and that takes time, and you want to kind of begin 12 months out.
Well, I wonder if it has started. We might get to that. We'll get as well to the perceptions of the leaders, at least in the eyes of Stephen Donnelly, former Labor figure who now runs the Dunn Street Political Consultancy. We'll get back to Stephen after we get some traffic with Dan Belling.
ABC Radio Melbourne, traffic.
Thank you, Raf. Called a freeway collision outbound just after the Tullah split. Only the right lane is getting past emergency services there. Pakenham Bypass, there's a smash outbound before Cardinia Road, blocking the left lane. If you're heading home to Pakenham off the Monash Freeway, jump off at the Beaconsfield exit, take the highway. M80 Ring Road, broken down car Greensborough bound at the Hume Freeway exit. The second right lane has been closed. Our crew are there. And Mount Waverley just cleared a smashed Blackburn Road northbound between the Monash Freeway and Waverley Road. For public transport, a broken down truck still blocking tram tracks Matthews Avenue. No Route 59 trams running between Keilor Road and Airport West. 21 past 6, that's the latest traffic and transport.
David Lipson here on PM at 6:30. A defiant Scott Morrison stares down calls for him to resign from Parliament, seeking to explain why he needed additional powers and why he kept it secret. Also, Liz Cheney, one of the last and most vocal critics of Donald Trump amongst Republicans in the US Congress, is ousted by Wyoming voters, and people living in high-risk flood areas should be moved elsewhere urgently, a New South Wales inquiry finds. But in Lismore, it's left some locals with more questions than answers.
We're all just so tired, and it's just more limbo in a way, even though it seems to be going in a positive direction. In the meantime, just living in the wreckage of it all.
It's PM tonight.
Raf Esptein.
Stephen Donnelly is with us. The podcast is Socially Progressive. Some of your texts, Nigel in Templestowe saying there's a large door-knocking and phone-calling campaign in Menzies by Labor. My mother received multiple calls from the Labor candidate, Naomi Oakley, and it almost helped win the seat, which now has a margin of 0.3%. So Nigel saying boots on the ground can make a difference. And someone texting and attacking me, you always forget the Greens. They've been door-knocking for ages. The new Queensland MPs did it and won. That made a difference in Brisbane, didn't it, with the Greens?
Yeah, without a doubt. Absolutely.
Yeah. Matthew Guy's big switcheroo today is to press pause on the suburban rail loop. I'm sure back in June he said he wouldn't cancel that project. He's not going to cancel it, but he's not going to go forward with it. Here's Matthew Guy's justification today.
Building and upgrading 20 new hospitals is my priority, not building a railway tunnel from Box Hill to Cheltenham. Ensuring that when Victorians call for an ambulance, it comes. Ensuring that when you present at an emergency department, you can be seen.
What do you think, Stephen Donnelly, most people... I'm going to do this soon, actually, because I'm not sure even what Matthew Guy's face recognition is like. I just don't know. But what are most people's perceptions, do you think, of the Liberal leader?
As a opposition leader, first of all, it is difficult to get cut through. I think most people probably don't know him. Those that do know him clearly rejected him at the last election in 2018 heavily. I think that people think him as, or know him as the cuts guy. I think his personality is angry. I think he's trying to change that, but I think that veil came off just recently when he was...
the stuff about the chief of staff.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, right? And it just we saw a revert back to angry Matt again. So I think he's got a lot of work to do to build a relationship with the voter for them to feel confident about voting for him at the election in November.
What about Dan Andrews or Dan? Oh, God, I get confused. Matthew is now Matt. Dan was Daniel, but I got used to that. What are the perceptions of the Premier?
Well, I think Daniel's got... I call him Daniel just only because I've been in the party so long. I think the Premier has a strong recognition I think that if you look at a lot of the published research, shows that his approval ratings are strong and very high for a long-term leader in a government.
Arrogant? Do people think he's arrogant?
I don't get the impression that people think he's arrogant. That okay, there are liberal voters
people
out
who
there.
don't like him, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about people in the middle, people less engaged.
Yeah, I don't think that they do think he's arrogant. I think that they see him as a strong leader. I think that's what people want in a leader. I think that they want a leader to be seen to be getting things done and delivering on the promises. I think
And
there's a
do
suspicion.
they lean into Dan Andrews? Do they not lean into him because of the pandemic, or do they not bother with the Dan Andrews thing because everyone's kind of made... I just wonder, because it's been there so long, right? So maybe everyone's made up their mind. So if you're running a campaign, do you go, oh, hey, here's all the other people in the government, or we're going to focus on the message and not the person? What do you do? Do you lean into him or not?
Not wanting to give advice to the Liberal Party, but you've got me now on the radio station, so I will do that. I think that the best advice comes from a Victorian Liberal senator who said on the election night coverage in May this year that when sort of reflecting on the Liberal Party's campaign and why they did so poorly in Victoria, that there's an obsession. We overestimated the level of hatred towards Dan Andrews. And I think that what we've seen over the last 8 years is the Liberal Party, Matthew Guy, and even sort of sections of the media, News Corp, are obsessed with Daniel Andrews. Daniel Andrews lives rent-free in their minds and is shifting the furniture around in their heads every single day. And not to get all high and mighty, but, you know, we on the left made that mistake with John Howard. From 1995 to 2006, we were obsessed with John Howard. You know, we hated him. We hated what he stood for. You know, we had T-shirts that suggested how much we hated him. We had stickers that said, "Not happy John," if you remember those things. You know, there was... Powderfinger wrote a song about how much of a bad leader he was. We were obsessed. John Howard won 4 elections in a row. Whether you like him or not, he was a very, very effective leader, and he was in our heads. And it was only until 2007 when we started to talk about the issues that are impacting Australians' lives and not John Howard did we win. And I think that the Liberal Party and the Herald Sun have not learnt that lesson for 8 consistent years, and I don't see any reason why they're going to change now.
Thanks so much for coming in, Stephen.
My pleasure.
We'll get Stephen back. We had Tony Barry last week. But the bloke at Tony Barry's ex-Liberal, Stephen is ex-Labor. The bloke Tony works with Costamara, so you've heard with Virginia. We'll just try to get these people coming through every Wednesday just to give you some perspective on what the contest might be about on Friday. At the end of November, I should say. I don't know why I said Friday. I see David Astle and